anytime now, and just let me give you the host.
Yeah, sure. We can start now. Thank you. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, although I missed the earlier parts, but I know that the experts from Nanhua and DBS has already given a very comprehensive introduction on, access to China's securities and derivatives markets via the QFI license. Especially I think from their perspectives, the cash management, the account structure, and also the various, derivatives and futures products, which are now available to QFIs in principle. So from my perspective, I advise a lot of foreign investors in applying for the QFI license and also, using the license for their onshore investments in China. And more importantly, as a lawyer, although it may be a headache, but we have to remind our clients again and again that once they have the QFI license, they will be subject to certain PRC regulatory or compliance requirements on an ongoing basis. So pay attention to it. It's not a one-off deal, but rather an ongoing process. So I think we will quickly skip the first slides. The first one actually is an overview of the recent QFI regulatory reforms. I think the DBS expert has also covered this, so we will just skip it. But a fact that I would like to share here is that actually the QFI regulatory reform, the purpose of most of the reforms is to facilitate the foreign investors' QFI application and their investments under the QFI license. So from PRC regulators' perspective, they want to make the QFI program attractive again. Why I say again is because actually now, other than QFI, we have some other access channels to the PRC securities markets. For example, the Stock Connect, the Bond Connect, or CIBM, etc. We will also have the Swap Connect now. So there are some overlapped, investment scopes between QFI and the other access channels. So as a result of which, the foreign investors, they have more options to invest in the China markets. A metaphor that I would always use, for my clients is that, it's rather like going into a Chinese restaurant, and you are now looking at a menu, which is getting longer and longer, but you need to, make your own choice depending on your own appetite and interest, and know, which one is more suitable for your investment objectives. So the regulators' efforts to make the QFI program attractive again and convenient and more convenient have received very positive market reactions from the international investors community. So I would like to share some numbers here. In 2017, the new QFI license approved by CSRC is 13. So it's 13 in 2017. And then 2018, the number is 18. And 2019, the number is 21. And we know that the new CSRC's QFI rules took effect from November the 1st, 2020. So in the first 10 months of 2020, the total new QFI licenses approved by CSRC amounts to 26. And then what happened, after the new rule took effect, in the last 2 months of 2020, there are 45 new QFIs approved by CSRC. And then in 2021, there's a record high number of 119 new QFIs approved by CSRC. So it shows that the regulatory efforts to make the program attractive again is well received and positively reacted by the international investors. And more interestingly, if you look at the list of the QFI club, right? Actually, there has been some new developments of the types of the license holders or the QFI applicants. If we look at the names before, there are many big name asset managers, the buy sides, etc. But now in recent years, we have also seen some, mid to small to mid scale asset managers and some diversified or alternative managers, including hedge fund managers, including the prop traders, etc. market makers. So I think that also shows, the PRC regulators, they are keeping a open mind, for the QFI applicants, and they welcome more specified or more diversified investors to the QFI program. And then I think I will quickly cover the key points of the new rules. I'm sure some of them are already covered in the earlier parts. Again, to make the application easier for the foreign investors, actually most of the hard requirements have been removed. For example, the AUM, the number of the minimum AUM requirement and the minimum track record requirement. And also now it has moved the restrictions on the countries and the regions. Right? So no discrimination at all. So all applicants from all over the world are generally welcomed. And I think, from a legal perspective, the account structure is also very important for the investors to make sure that their asset ownership is clear. So I think on that point, the PRC regulators have also made the account structure clearer, and they are facilitating, more types of, account structures. Another thing I would like to highlight here is the ongoing supervision. So although the regulators have taken, positive steps and, make efforts to facilitate the investments and also to make the entry to the markets easier. But I think at the same time, they have also emphasized, the ongoing compliance and the ongoing supervision from a regulatory perspective. If, for example, for the disclosure requirements, there is a so-called look-through requirement. The QFIs underlying clients, is also obliged to make information disclosures via the QFI license holder. And also, there is a provision in the CSRC's new rule that if upon the regulator's request, the QFIs shall report their offshore hedging positions. And also think the rules, they have specified some penalties on the QFIs and also the responsible persons. In case of any violation or non-compliance, and those penalties or punishments include the regulatory talk or some warning letters and the other rectification measures. So for that purpose, actually we usually will develop a so-called compliance checklist, for our QFI clients. On the checklist, we will set up certain the key regulatory requirements, including the reporting requirements, both on the ad hoc and on the periodical basis, and also the key trading restrictions or compliance requirements. for example, if you trade A shares in China, there are some key requirements that you need to be aware of. For example, the disclosure of interest, and the threshold is 5%. And there's also a so-called short swing profit rule. The threshold of holding is also 5%, and which means, while the threshold is reached, you cannot sell and buy the shares within 6 months or vice versa. And also, in China, at the exchanges level, we have the abnormal trading monitoring mechanism. And although the rules, they have set up some, abnormal trading patterns, but in practice, actually, the exchanges will also have some internal standards or guidelines on, what types of trading will constitute abnormal trading. I think this requirement or regulatory aspect is especially relevant to the investors whose investment strategies involve, quant trading, program trading, high frequency trading, etc. Because those trading strategies, by nature may cause more market movements while they trade on the PRC exchanges. Another interesting point to note is that while the application has been made streamlined and further simplified, but we also note that in the most updated application forms provided by CSRC, there have been some additional disclosure requirements. For example, in the new application form, the regulator will ask the investor to represent or explain whether their investment strategy involve program trading, or whether their strategy involves any shorting of A shares, any quant trading, and another requirement is that the application form actually includes a investment plan under the QFI license, which means you have to disclose to the regulators that how you would like to utilize your license, right? And also the source of funds, etc. Although the investment plan requirement is not a new one, but there is a new requirement there is a new express requirement that the QFIs, they need to stick to their investment plans that are submitted to the regulators for the application purpose. And otherwise, they need to notify the PRC regulators in advance. Well, before the application forms are updated by the PRC regulators, it is, it is not an express requirement. Although we have advised our clients, to follow this because, the regulatory spirit is that, when you submit, after you have submitted your investment plan, the regulator would expect you, to make the investments in compliance with your plan. So I think that that makes sense. Yeah, those are this slide actually lists out the key ongoing compliance requirements. Some of them I have just covered. And also on the trading compliance, also includes some market manipulation and insider trading, which are prohibited under the PRC laws. And that applies to all the investors on the markets, whether it's foreign under QFI license or it's domestic investors. And there's also a requirement of the foreign ownership limits. Actually, there are two types of limits under the QFI rules. The first one is the single investor limit, which is 10%. And that means any single foreign investor cannot hold more than 10% of a PRC listed company's A shares. and that's actually, you need to consider some aggregation, for the compliance purpose, because, as I just mentioned, now other than QFI, you have other access channels. So you need to aggregate your positions of the same company under various channels that you are using, QFI, Stock Connect, etc. So that's a tricky part. And then there's another limit, which is the total market limit. It's 30%. It means that all the foreign investors in aggregate cannot hold more than 30% of a company's shares, listed shares. That one, I don't think we need to worry about it too much, because the stock exchanges, they will send out some alerts, when the total holding reaches to 26, or I think it's 26 or 28%. Yeah. So in terms of futures and derivatives trading, I'm sure the Nanhua futures, they have covered this. Again, the regulatory status is that now in principle, the QFIs are allowed to trade eligible, futures and derivatives products, which basically include all the commodity futures and options in China's commodity futures exchanges. However, we're still waiting for some further green lights from CSRC and from the exchange to commence trading. And another point I would like to share here is that actually, on a related note, China just passed its futures and derivatives law earlier this year. So this law took effect from August 1st this year, so just this month. And that is the very first, futures law in China's legislation history. So that's a big thing. And also interestingly, in the law, it is expressly provided that this piece of law applies to futures transactions, derivative transactions, and the related activities conducted within mainland China and also outside mainland China, which may disrupt the domestic market order or damage the lawful interests of domestic traders. So we note that this law has provided some extraterritorial effect. And of course, because this law is brand new, right? There's still a lack of real cases or precedents that I think it remains to be tested or to be seen that how the legislators or the law enforcement authorities, they would apply or implement the relevant provisions. But it's very interesting. Well, another aspect I would like to quickly cover is between QFI and the onshore PFM. The onshore PFM refers to onshore private fund manager or onshore private investment fund manager. So the reason I would like to cover this is because one of the efforts that CSRC is making is to give the QFI as well as the onshore PFM more business opportunities. So we know that actually for some big international asset managers, they have both the QFI license and also they have set up their onshore private PFM entities. So CSRC basically allows the onshore PFM to provide the so-called investment advisory license to their affiliated QFI. And so I think that gives the onshore PFM more business. And at the same time, because the onshore PFM, as a private fund manager under the PRC law, they need to launch private funds. Particularly, they need to launch the very first private fund within 6 months after they are registered with the PRC authority. So the CSRC has allowed the QFIs to invest in the onshore PFM funds, and not limited to affiliated PFMs. So it means the PFM actually can use the QFIs money to resolve the seeding capital problem, because some of the managers, they are new to the market, and the distribution is challenging, especially at the initial stage. So we have seen a successful case on market, which is the onshore PFM product was launched by Barings, the asset manager, and they use their own QFI to seed their PFM fund. And that one was launched at the end of 2020. Well, I would also want to quickly compare the QFI program and the other access channels. I think some of them may be covered earlier, the QFI versus Stock Connect. And generally speaking, the QFI has a larger investment scope. And also the QFI had its exclusive license and is no longer subject to any investment quota. Yeah, but Stock Connect, it's subject to a daily market quota, and it's limited to A shares. But at the same time, but on the other hand, the Stock Connect trading would be relatively easier because there's no, license application process involved, and you can just open an account with your offshore broker. And for Bond Connect, it's quite similar. The Bond Connect or the CIBM Direct, they are limited to the RMB bonds products. But the QFIs, they covered bonds as well as other asset classes. And then the QFI versus market access products, because in the past, and also currently, we know that some managers, in order to save the application process, etc., they use some market access products to gain the economic exposure to the A shares. But it's only economic exposure. They don't have ownership to the A shares, not as a registered owner, etc. And there will be some additional costs involved. And another point is that, from a PRC regulatory perspective, the market access products always is not, encouraged by the PRC regulators, including CSRC and SAFE, because the regulators would encourage, all the foreign investors to have their own license or use other legitimate access channels to gain, their A shares interest. And then Swap Connect, which is also another brand new development, just launched a couple of months ago. So it's a new connect scheme, between China and the overseas markets. But the securities are generally related to swaps. Okay, I think that concludes my presentation today. I hope it offers some, additions to the what has been covered just now, and to give you a relatively, comprehensive picture of, what the QFI program would benefit your investments in China. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, which is definitely, educational. I have to say I was benefited a lot. And okay, all of our speakers has finished sharing, so I guess let's just move on to the QA session. And if you have any questions regarding just now, please bring it up in the chat room and our speakers can answer it. Okay, let me just go ahead and show on. All right, I saw there were already some questions, and Tom was asking, what is the cost before you start trading if it takes another year? Mara, do you want to take that one? Okay, here, Mara.
Yes, so for the first question regarding to the cost, if you come to open the futures account and the bank account, it's no cost at all before you really trade it. So before you're trading, we have no cost at all. So that's why we said highly recommended to the client to come to open the account at first.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is for the second question, for the first question.
And also there were audience asking, can I trade Shanghai metals, please? You want to take that one too, Mara?
Oh, okay. So I assume you are asking for the Shanghai Exchange Metals at this moment. We can trade the bonded copper in the international contracts, except for this. If you want to trade some metals else, we need to throw the swap.
Thank you.
Yes.
And another question, if there's margin call, how long will it take to transfer funds from offshore to onshore? I assume Aris, do you want to take this one?
Thanks. For the cross-border fund transfer, actually that will depend on the all participating bank, because for example, it's USD. For USD, the remitting bank must provide instruction to its intermediary bank. So aside from the remitting bank speed, it depends on their USD intermediary bank speed. And as their intermediary bank might be different from our, like DBS China's USD intermediary bank. So the beneficiary bank's intermediary bank's speed also matters. So what DBS China as a QFI bank can do is just to tell the client that we haven't received the fund and ask the customer to chase its remitting bank. So only after the USD has arrived at DBS China, we could ask our operation to speed and process the credit into the account like in 1 to 2 hours. Hope about clarifies.
Thank you very much. It does. And another question was asking if the broker blows up, who would take the hit? I think I would just take that one, Tom. Basically, I would assume you were asking if your money was safe with the onshore broker in China. And if that's the case, I think your money will, your fund will being transferred from the custodian bank and to your futures trading account, and which is actually supervised by CFMNC, also known as China Future Margin Monitoring Center. So your fund will be safe and is not going to be mixed up with the broker's own money. And the concept behind this is somehow similar to the relationship between SEC account and house account from an offshore perspective. But the difference is every one of the clients will have their SEC account and in their corresponding custodian bank. I wish I've answered your question, Tom. Okay, one last question. And in the case that a QFI invests local private default fund, and the default fund invests a local private fund, and the local private fund invests stock exchange shares, does the QFI have to report the holdings of underlying shareholding of the local private fund to CSRC?
I can cover this question. The answer is no. The answer is no. We as the QFI custodian bank just report your private fund holding to the CSRC, not the underlying shareholding.
Okay, thank you very much. And okay, so if you have more questions, please feel free to send us email at nanhua@nanhua.com. Then that is NHOverseas@NAWAA.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, so there's no more questions. That's pretty much everything we would like to cover for today. And thank you very much again to all our speakers and audience. And thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. All right.